Thanks for tuning in to the episode of The Aydin Show, sponsored by our friends at Casa Homes. Enjoy the show. Welcome to The Aydin Show. The word Aydin means enlighten. That's exactly our goal. This podcast is to enlighten you, share knowledge and wisdom, and inspire our youth. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Ahmed Uruch, and today's guest is Nur Warsame. Welcome. Brother, did I pronounce that right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, excellent. Brother Nur, tell me and the viewers a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Nur Warsame. I'm originally from Somalia. Yeah. I'm 36 years old, and we migrated from when I was very young from Somalia to Egypt. So we were sort of the lucky ones. Most of Somalians would have gone through the civil war, which happened in the late 90s.
Okay.
We were lucky we left before
what was it? Were they fighting each other? What were they fighting each other over?
Civil war, mainly tribalism.
Okay.
Somalia, which has been going on since 1991 now.
So it hasn't stopped?
It's a failed state because, ironically, Somalia is the only country in the whole of Africa that has one religion, one language, even one sect when it comes to Islam. But one of the most brutal civil wars of our time since 1990. Tribalism. There's 21 tribes. Each tribe leader wants to be the president.
Yeah, there's a few countries like that, unfortunately.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, I think Afghanistan's a lot like that as well, where they're just trying to take power and take control of the place, yeah. So when did you and your family arrive in Australia? What was that?
So we came in late 90s, I would say 97, I think March it was. And we arrived in Melbourne. I remember we first moved into an area called French Wheelers Hill. And then from there we moved to Mulgrave.
Yeah.
Coming from Egypt, we lived in Cairo. Something like several million people in one city to an area where it was very rare to see even people walking in the street.
So what was Cairo like? How was it? Like being Egypt, is that, I haven't been, so being in Egypt, is that like where the pyramids are? Or?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it's, and it's very, busy city. It's a very, very busy city. So coming from there to Wheelers Hill, it was a bit of a...
Yeah, it would have been. Hearing the kookaburras and the birds singing, yeah, definitely would have been a big difference. Look, I guess you're an Imam. So tell us how that happened. Tell us a little bit about how you learnt the Quran, how you became a Hafiz.
Well, alhamdulillah, I would still consider myself a student of knowledge. I think one never ceases to learn. But it was an area that we were, I didn't choose it from a young age. But the memory was a gift that I had from a very young age. So that's something that my, some teachers and my mom noticed that in me. And alhamdulillah, she invested more effort in hiring tutors to teach us Quran. And
so they brought him home?
Alhamdulillah, yeah. So we had the Azhari ulama from the Majma', and it was mostly youth, Somali youth who escaped the civil war, who were becoming imams themselves. Some of them were doing masters and PhDs in Sharia studies and fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence. So we received the knowledge, what's called the Abjadiyat, the ABC of Islam from such teachers.
Okay.
And alhamdulillah, along the way, I fell in love with it. My older brother...
And again, were you younger when you fell in love with it? Okay.
Yeah. From the age of 6, 7, Taraweeh prayers, I remember even sometimes Qiyamul Layl, the late night prayer, from as young as 7 years old, I remember.
Okay. And so how did you later on learn the Quran? I mean, how did you learn it off by heart? How did that all come about?
So alhamdulillah, I think the fadl always goes to Allah Azza wa Jalla, and after Allah, it was my mother. My mother who saw something in me that was not there amongst my other siblings, and invested extra effort in that part of my upbringing, that development. So when we came to Australia, I had about 20 juz'. The Quran is 30 juz', 30 parts.
Yep.
So at when we first came here, I was in year 11. So I did my VCE here, year 11, and year 12. And from the age of, I think from when I was in year 11, I had about 20 juz'. But finished year 12 VCE, and then, there was 10 parts remaining. So it was a bit of a conscious thing for me. And however, my parents wanted me to get into universities and things like that. So
like all parents do, especially with people that come from overseas.
Right. So I remember behind their back, I contacted some friends of mine who we were studying Quran together, and I heard of. I was involved with the Tabligh movement. I think I mentioned before, and I heard of youth who were getting scholarships going to. It was places that I haven't personally experienced. I experienced Azhar, Egypt, that type of madaris and kutab, but I heard of students going places like South Africa was a place, Malaysia was another place.
Malaysia's a big one, yeah.
Correct, Kuala Lumpur. And these were madaris, specifically to cater to memorize the Quran. So between 8 to 12 hours a day, you're sitting on the floor.
So you were in Egypt?
Initially, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So after I came here, finished year 12, I got a scholarship to go to South Africa.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you went to South Africa, you studied?
I finished 1 year. I finished the remaining 10 parts, perfected, alhamdulillah. The remaining 20 that was, not very strong. Alhamdulillah, it took me 1 year.
Yeah.
I came back, it was towards the end of 2001. I came back to Melbourne.
Okay.
Just around the time September 11 happened.
Oh, I guess you're lucky. So you didn't have to get pulled over at the airport and searched. Okay. Also hadiths. Tell us your thoughts on hadiths.
Well, we believe, and I do believe in hadith, and it's a prerequisite of a person's faith in Islam, I believe, to, second part of the testimony of faith is Muhammad Rasulullah. And that includes hadith. And but my area was commentary. I studied the tafsir of the Quran. Hadith was available. Many ulama, many teachers were quite competent in that field. But where I fell, my passion was towards mainly commentary and learning the different tafsir.
Okay.
That was my what I have invested my time, and I continue to.
Yeah. So are you Sunni Muslim?
Alhamdulillah.
Do you follow a mezhab?
We grew up with the Shafi'i madhab, so I would consider myself a follower of Imam Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, so the Shafi'i school of thought, which is predominantly most Somalian people follow Shafi'i madhab.
I guess the times we live in at the moment, it's a bit indecisive with what's happening with Hajj around the world because of this whole corona pandemic. We're not sure if the borders are going to open or if any Muslims are going to be able to do their Hajj this year. You've been Hajj?
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Yes.
Okay, how many times have you been there?
6 altogether. It was 5 that I can claim myself.
6?
Yes.
Wow, and you're 37 years old?
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Yes.
Wow, mashallah, that's a big effort.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.
You mentioned a few times that you're a senior imam, or were you a senior imam at a mosque, or were you an imam at a mosque?
Imam, yes. I would never classify senior. Yes, the hair is already going grey, but I would I wouldn't classify myself.
But you were an imam at a mosque?
Correct.
Which mosque was
2
that?
mosques. So for the beginning days, it was Monash University, the Musalla at the back of the Clayton campus. So at that time, it was an old, worn-out type of house that the university dedicated to the Muslim students at the Clayton campus. And I remember Jum'ah time sometimes used to be between 1 line, maybe 1.5, 2 lines. But alhamdulillah now, as the years grew and several brothers, it was a very spiritually therapeutic message at that place for a person who came from the background that I came from, and to find a community after we left the community that I was spiritually connected to in Egypt, in Cairo, these people who were my foundation. So to find an alternative in Melbourne, in Clayton, alhamdulillah, was spiritually fulfilling.
Listerfield Mosque?
Listerfield was later on.
Okay, that was later on.
Later on, yes, yeah.
Okay.
So for about 6-7 years, I was at Monash Clayton.
Monash Clayton.
Monash Clayton, yeah. So from 1 to 2 lines to about 800. Now I hear the hall has about 2,000 or something people it follows. They play in the sports hall now. And, Eid prayers are in the open, in the oval, alhamdulillah.
Wow, that's pretty good. Okay, you were very busy, I guess. You were also part of the Board of Imams in Victoria.
Alhamdulillah.
How did that all happen?
Well, I mean, that time in the beginning days, we didn't have a structure. Like now there is the national bureaucratic system that the imams are subjected to. In those days, and when I was involved, the old days with Sheikh Fahmi, I don't know if you remember Sheikh Fahmi, rahmatullah alayhi. Those days there wasn't that structure, and most of it was imams who were. I even remember one of the first things we used to do was chaplaincy, prison chaplaincy. So myself and a brother called Aziz, we were one of the first ones. And that time there was no funding, but it was lillah azza wa jal, for Allah azza wa jal. And sometimes I remember the toll it used to take on the brother Aziz, who used to drive the family car, driving sometimes to faraway prisons, like Fulham. For Eid, we used to have a barbecue for the brothers and that. We didn't have a structure now. Now apparently there's funding that is specific catered for the chaplaincy service within the Muslim. We didn't have any of that structures back then. Back then it was a group of imams that catered for the southeastern suburbs. Yeah. Some catered for the western suburbs, and we always came once a year together at the Carlton Albanian Masjid there.
Okay. Yes. I've never been there.
Yeah. I highly recommend if you have time, inshallah. Or if you pass by Drummond Street, I think it's parallel to Lygon Street. Okay. I think one of the oldest masjids.
It is, isn't it? Is that the first masjid here in Victoria?
Allah Alam, I think it's one of the oldest in Victoria.
Okay. Now, what happened when they found out that you were gay?
Well, I think, it was a decision that I didn't take lightly. I have seen many young people in the Muslim community suffering. I've seen many people, some friends of mine, attempting suicide, cutting themselves. Many I have seen rejecting Islam. So it was, I think, an act of fury that made me, because the other imams, whenever I would open the subject, it was very difficult to even have a conversation.
So this is Board of Imams and other imams that are out there. You
globally sometimes.
Okay, so you didn't come out and say, "Hey, I'm gay." Is it something they heard through the media or?
Oh yes. When I made the decision, I didn't care about what it was several years of turning a blind eye to young people that were suffering, and nobody would. Always, I've noticed the imams tiptoed around that particular topic.
Yeah.
So I think, and maybe it was an act of rebelliousness from me, or an act of fury that made me use the media platform, even though I used it a bit late. It was 2015, the first interview I did with...
Only 5 years ago?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
However,
So you would have been 30, 32?
Correct.
Yeah.
I started a group called Marhaba in November 2013, and from then, there was interest from the media. However, the safety of the youth and their anonymity and managing the trauma that I was seeing on a daily basis was more important than media at that time.
You came out pretty late. I mean, you came out when you were 32 years old. So, when did you feel that you were gay? When did you feel that, okay, it's time that, I come out and tell everyone?
Well, I think these feelings, we had them when we were youth, in the madaris, learning Quran and that, boys in student accommodation, 10, testosterone in the air. So, but it was something that we thought in the beginning days, I used to think it was what young people go through, and then what is said, and one would grow out of it. However, the environment was not an environment that was receptive to even ask questions about this. It was
But what was it like before you came out? So what was the community like?
There was none. There was no community. It was yes, my family.
You were part of a
Absolutely.
community though, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So your family would have been part of one. You being Somali, and you guys
Correct,
would have had a community.
Well, I
around
thought you
you.
meant coming out as the gays. Yeah,
No.
right. Well, I think yes. I mean, I did reflect on that. I remember when I first decided to take a stand on that particular principle. It was after receiving a phone call from a school counselor. I was counseling a young 16-year-old girl in an Islamic school. And the school counselor was not Muslim, but asked a theological question, which was, if we Muslims believe that if you pray with homosexual tendencies, that your prayers curse you, because that's what this 16-year-old parents told her.
Okay.
So this counselor called to ask if this was the case. So, and this was a personal journey of mine, myself, and what I have seen on a national level, often even on an international scale. It was November 2013 that I have decided to start something. Now, I didn't have a manual, I didn't have a guide, but I just wanted to provide a platform.
So you had a community. Those were your friends, family, brothers that you grew up with around the mosque, and you didn't care what they thought, and you came out because you obviously felt something, and you said to them that you were gay.
Well, I wouldn't say I didn't care about what they thought. That would be a harsh analysis. I did care.
Yeah.
The threats came to my front door. My sisters were threatened. My own daughter was bullied in 1 year, 2 separate schools. And these were issues that I did think of. However, I was not willing to accept the fact that somebody was being told in the name of Islam and in the name of Allah Azza wa Jal that they were a sin or an impurity or something najis,
Yeah.
So that was, I thought of that. I mean, I remember my teacher, Musa Rahmatullah Ali, used to tell us this is the teacher who I finished with in South Africa. He used to tell us, before you make a decision, to think of 1,000 scenarios, and he would always make us start with the worst case scenario and actually ask us to write it down. I mean, we never reached 100 or even half of that, but he would still make us write. And when I took this stand, I remember in November 2013, I thought carefully of the consequences to myself, to my family, to my community. However, I was not willing to keep silent of an act of dhulm that I was seeing happening in the name of Islam.
Okay. Can you blame the Muslim community for suicides in gay Muslims?
Wallahi, I don't think. I mean, that is not my... nobody has the right to blame anybody, I think. However, when we as a society, and especially as people who have this blessed religion and this kalima la ilaha illa Muhammad Rasulullah, that we have become a source that repels our own youth to the extent that the only alternative they find is to kill themselves. I think then we have gone against or what the initial message of Islam was, which is Bashir. Bashir is to give glad tidings and to attract people, not to repel. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never repelled people out of Islam.
But there is a reason why Muslim gay people are killing themselves. So what is it?
Well, I think it's trauma, that is not addressed. Always trauma, particularly when it comes to young men. And this is suicide rates. I mean, the numbers vary when you look in the West or in the East. But I think it's mostly Muslim men in our regions. And I think that is often because of Allah Azza wa Jal being used. And Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam, the Prophet Lut and the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And even the name of a Prophet Lut is used as an insult in the Arab culture. Luti is derogatory to, and it sounds like the F word when it's referring to gay people. Luti, and this is the Prophet Lut alayhi salam, whom, not even was involved in the evil of that village. And it goes against what the Quran says, the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah says, لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. We don't divide or separate between any of Allah's prophets. So I think that was what really made me angry.
Okay. Because looking at it, like I guess when you look at the LGBT youth as a whole, Muslim and non-Muslim, they've got the highest rate of suicide attempts. So I don't know how it can connect with just the community being at fault.
No, I didn't blame anybody. Remember, I didn't say anybody's at fault. However, these are our own kids, Ahmed.
Yeah.
These are our kids. And if we see our kids killing themselves, it's an issue that needs to be addressed. It's an issue that cannot be tiptoed around or left to other people. I remember I attended, it would have been 2015, Allah Alam, I think, yes. There was a conference, an African faith leaders conference, forum they called it, in Sydney. And it was addressing the issue of the rise of HIV rates amongst the African community, even though the African community is a very tiny percentage in the whole country.
Yeah, definitely.
Yet the numbers were the highest. In 1 year between, I think, Kirby Institute, 2014 to 2015, that 1 year showed it was the highest. And it was a national forum. Many people came, Christian priests, there was representation from almost all denominations. It was the first time I saw an African Buddhist monk, Then, I was the only Imam there. And I asked the doctor who was the host and invited me. I said, where is the Muslims? And there was two. They had what's called a positive panel or something like that. 3 individuals that were talking about their lived experiences and what they've gone through. These were African people. 2 were Muslims. One was a mother of 6 children. But sadly, the doctor said to me that they have sent invitations to all Islamic councils. Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia. The response was the same, denial. This is not a problem in our community. Comes to mind is a saying, الساكت عن الحق كالشيطان الأخرس. You keep silent of an act of truth or something khair or something evil that is happening, then you are similar to Prophet ﷺ said, a dumb and deaf devil.
Yeah. It's not going to be because of how they feel, that emptiness or the disconnection from Allah. Like it's not that, is it?
Wallahi, listen, the disconnection from Allah, we have to separate 2 things.
Because being gay or non-gay, I believe personally, like I'd talk from something that's happened with me when I've disconnected from Allah. I felt empty and depressed. And those type of thoughts have passed my mind a few times during my youth days when, I had nowhere to go. So I found as I got closer to Allah, as I started reading the Quran and looking at the proof of why we exist, that helped me a lot.
Right. Yes. Alhamdulillah. And that helps a lot of youth, many youth. There was a case I was following up on recently in Bangkok of a person who was transgender, had the actual sex change procedure and was saying, I want to go back. I understand that. I understand there's an entire ward at the Children's Hospital. If you have, I suggest to the audience, if they have a chance to go there, of kids who are born with these, and many of them, some of them are born with both sexual organs and they just castrate them and things like that. And it's traumatized. Is
it a small percentage of children? Like, is there probably 1 in,
have a look. It's in Melbourne.
Okay.
Have a look.
I've been there, but I've never gone there for
Have a look specifically for that.
Okay.
Yeah. Royal Children's Hospital is a big, and till now, it is by a doctor who comes and observes, okay, this bit is bigger than this bit, we close this.
They don't do tests, they don't do blood tests to see what if they're more of a male or a female, and
Well,
work
I mean,
according
they
to
would
that?
look. I don't know, but I know that it's through an observational test that a physician does. I mean, of course, they would have to do. And I'm not a doctor, so Allah alam. But I mean, that's why you see the ramifications of the malfunction of that medical care. You see those youth now. I think it's a holistic issue that we are lacking. It is the spiritual care, yes, that is necessary. Every parent, their child is their responsibility to help them and guide them in the development physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. And that is the actual the parenthood that Allah Azza wa Jal will reward a parent for. Because if we focus on materialistically, for example, I remember I was called one time to a brother's 7-day-old son, and he said, Sheikh Nur, come read some Quran. And we went there, and he said, Sheikh, doesn't he look like a doctor? And he's lifting this 7-day-old child. I think when we focus on one area, we neglect another area.
I think parents do make that mistake.
Absolutely.
And they shouldn't do it very early on, especially with their kids, having a dream for them and, kind of forcing them to live a life that they don't want to live. I understand that, yeah. Look, I guess you've been married.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. So you knew that you had these feelings of being gay for a very long time since you were young. However, you got married. So maybe run us through how that all took place and why.
Well, I think how we construct things is wrong. The term gay used to mean happy once upon a time. Now it means something completely different. I think sexuality is a spectrum. It doesn't have a binary code, black or white. And when I finished the Quran, I was told, alhamdulillah, now you have half of your iman, half of your faith is complete. You complete the other half. I said, how? They said, you get married, then you will have full iman.
We hear that a lot. I've heard that a lot as well. When you get married, I think there's hadiths around that where it says after your marriage, half your religion is fulfilled.
And of course I believe that because, I was not in an environment that I could speak with my father, for example. I mean, a boy, the first point or the first person that a young child who's developing sexually, intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, the first point of guidance should be the father. For a boy. A girl, maybe the mother. If I put it in that sense. But I was not in both avenues were not possible. And when, as a child, you want to, if you're missing food, you will cry. It was trauma, and that trauma, subhanAllah, as children, but now we notice in field of what psychologists say is they say, children, when they experience such trauma, they push it back. However, almost every psychologist and psychiatrist will say that trauma that is not addressed later on always comes back in some shape or form. It manifests into something else later. I think with me, the spiritual care of these youth was absolutely my intention. It was, I wanted to be a source of, I had a problem with people telling me I rejected Islam. That I had a big problem with. Secondly, I had a problem with, second thing I had a problem with was people who did what I did. I got married. I was married only for 1 year. And I came out to her. And it shocked her. It broke her. She loved me and I loved her. And, I brought this innocent girl because we didn't, I wasn't raised up to express my emotions. So I was emotionally illiterate.
Okay.
Quran, I could read from Alif Lam Mim till Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas and have some commentaries. And she felt betrayed. But alhamdulillah, from something negative like that, my daughter came, alhamdulillah, and she forgave me after 7 years. It took my ex-wife. But I had a problem with many young people who were doing similar to what I did and married with 2, 3, 4 or 5 children, and leading double life. This is nationally and internationally at times. So I thought, how can I start something where we could manage the trauma? It's irreversible, but manage it.
Okay. Who pulled it off? Was it you that kind of broke the marriage off, or was it her?
Well, the talaq, well, it's always the man now. So the talaq I did, yes, when I came out to her.
Okay. All right. Look, do you believe that being gay is an act of haram in any way?
No.
Okay. What do you think of it?
Well, I mean, the thing is, like I said to you, I don't agree with the structures, how we define human beings. I don't. When they gave me this title, Australia's first gay Imam, I never called myself that. I often say, I wonder where's Australia's first straight Imam. But I understand the reason for and the agendas that they had and whatnot. However, I don't think Allah Azza wa Jal would have created something in a human being. Like Allah says in the Quran, مَا يَفْعَلُ اللَّهُ بِعَذَابِكُمْ إِن شَكَرْتُمْ وَآمَنْتُمْ. Like Allah is not going to create sexuality. I don't think is a desire. I don't think somebody can choose or being this way or that way. It is like my color, something that one is created with. And it is a lifelong. It is not something that the person discovers it all of a sudden. Like I was saying to you, the woman who had the sex change and then after all that surgery went to Bangkok and thousands of dollars later said, I want to go back to...
Yeah. I guess, look, I always go back to the Quran for proof. So I'm not a Hafiz. I mean, I congratulate you for being one. It's a very big thing to have. But I do know that when I do have questions, when I do want to get answers, especially with what you're telling me, I will go to the Quran and look for them. And there's a verse that says, when I ask you, is being gay haram? I'm going by, and do not approach unlawful sexual intercourse. Indeed, it is ever an immorality and is evil as a way. Al-Isra 17-32. I mean, when you hear this type of verse, what do you think?
Immorality is amongst all sexes, amongst the heterosexuals and the homosexuals.
Yeah.
Many straight boys go out clubbing and sleep with different girls, etc., etc. I think to say to a young 15, 16-year-old boy who's going out into that scene to say, oh no, don't act immorally. I mean, Allah Azza wa Jal opened the door of Tawbah. And for us to just shut it, it is not our duty. Secondly, Allah Azza wa Jal, even when it came to the rules of menstruation, this is in Quran 2nd chapter, Al-Baqarah. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ قُلْ هُوَ أَذًى. They came to the Prophet asking questions. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ. They ask you. The response always came through the angel Jibreel. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ. They came and asked the Prophet about the menstrual cycle of a woman. What do we do as husbands with our wives when she's menstruating? Allah detailed the hukum, the ruling. فَلَا تَقْرَبُهُنْ. The woman is halal for you, except that part for those number of days. At the end of the verse, Allah ends it, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ التَّوَّابِينَ وَيُحِبُّ الْمُتَطَهِرِينَ. Allah loves those who repent and loves those who do tahara, clean themselves. And the ulama of tafsir, they say that even though Allah is describing a rule, yet Allah knows that there will be men that will err, that will not abide by that.
Because there are some podcasts that I've watched you, and you say that the Quran is outdated or misinterpreted in some ways. I guess what's your interpretation? What's the proof that you have that what you're doing is considered okay and not adultery or fornication?
Well, I don't think, if you will quote me, tell me exactly what I said. I never said, I said the interpretations of the Quran, not the Quran itself. This is a book that has no
fault.
لا ريب فيه, the Quran says, the 2nd chapter, the 2nd verse, ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه. So I would have never said, given that the foundation that I've had with the Quran from a very young age, I wouldn't have said that about the Kalam of Allah. However, I think it is the ulama, the imams who use Allah Azza wa Jal's words to, instead of giving bishara, giving good news and promoting this deen of salama, have repelled young people and have misused the name of Allah Azza wa Jal and the kalam of Allah Azza wa Jal. Historically,
there are some extremists. Yeah, there are a lot of extremist people, even the ones that are obviously recruiting kids to ISIS and all the rest of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I kind of understand that.
Well, and the thing is that has always existed. However, my focus in this particular area is within the commonalities, the story of Lut alayhi salam within the Abrahamic religions. It is that, and how do we address the mental health crisis that we are seeing? And sometimes parents try to manage that, and it just gets worse. Yes,
yeah. Because I guess Haram in the Quran is mentioned when you obviously sleep with another person. For example, there's a verse in the Quran that says, "The woman and the man found guilty of adultery or fornication, flog each of them with 100 stripes. Let not compassion move you in their case in the matter prescribed by God, if you believe in God in the last day, and let a party of the believers witness their punishment." Nur 24:2. Yeah.
How many people do you see get whipped here for sleeping out on? This is zina. How many young people do you know have done zina? I mean, I
think you need proof, though, don't you? Like,
course,
I understand a lot of
the... One second. The Quran, though, if we will use the Quran as the manual, that's the argument. We can't be selective, akhi. I think with the mistake that we are doing, which is repeating the mistake of the Jews and Christians, because when a particular hukum was applicable on one person, it was, what they say about zina, for example, it's a phase. I mean, there are many ayat in the Quran that talk about zina. What you just mentioned, Surah An-Nur, second verse, there's many verses that talk about alcohol. There's many verses that talk, the only place that Allah Himself declares war in the Quran is when somebody deals in interest.
But there's also many verses in the Quran that talk about gay people.
Not once you will find the term gay.
Okay.
Not once you will find the term homosexual in the Quran. Not once, and I challenge anyone.
Have you blamed the community for the ideology being outdated?
Sorry?
So from the Quran, have you blamed? So you've kind of mentioned it just now that how they're preaching, how their ideology is. What is it? Like, what are they doing? What are they preaching that's so wrong?
Wallah, I don't know what you're asking, akhi. I mean, are you asking my frustration with the imams? I mean, I haven't had go at our community at all.
No. I mean,
I'm managing the trauma that is produced by our community. I'm managing it. Alhamdulillah, with the effort that I've done, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and I'm unworthy and I feel humbled. But many have returned back to Islam, Alhamdulillah. And I can say some have divorced, the ones who have been leading a double life with one brother, 4 children.
4 children, wow.
Children, yeah.
And he's come out 10 years married, and then he comes out and says, "I'm gay."
Yeah. Well, the oldest was a great-grandfather in the southeastern suburbs. Great-grandfather.
Yeah.
I think it's about managing that. However, my frustration, akhi, and this is what Allah will ask. Allah, the first 3 people that Allah will judge in the Day of Judgment, one is a alim. And what frustrates me is when you see ulama and imams with huge masajid and great powers of the word. With one word, they can make a young person's life or destroy a young person's life.
Mm-hmm.
That is my where my frustration and anger and disappointment is at. Not
I understand. Like, I guess a kid feeling some feelings towards another man, having these and trying to approach someone to talk about it. There is nothing like that available. We all know that. You'll maybe approach, I don't know what mosque is with which Imam accepts that, and they do need to be a little bit more, understanding the times we live in. When these kids come, we need to speak to them in a way they feel comfortable and not leave the religion. So I get that. Will you ever marry a man?
No. I mean,
Do you think it's okay to marry the same sex?
Well, you live in a country, akhi, that has legalized marriage equality recently.
Yeah.
You live in that country. So my opinion is irrelevant. The country that we live under has legalized it.
But this is the opinion of the Quran. Would ye really approach men in your lusts rather than women? Nay, ye are the people grossly ignorant. So it says, would ye really approach men in your lusts rather than women? Nay, ye are a people grossly ignorant. Nahl 27:55.
Normally, yes.
Yeah.
So in that verse, women will be okay if women will to lay with women?
But it's talking about your case.
Men.
Yeah.
Let's say hypothetically, I mean, I don't think it's talking about my case. That is your interpretation, which is, I believe, wrong.
What's wrong about it, brother?
It is you. I mean, you can't just read the text, akhi.
Okay.
You can't just read. You have to know the history, the sequence, the context, the verses. I mean, you can't just be like the person who said, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, woe to those who pray, and not finishing the end of the verse. This has a sequence. We can't be, and that's the frustration.
But a lot of people that come to Islam, reverts, read this Quran and find this message to be concrete and embrace Islam because of it. So they'll
get you to talk about the story of Sayyidina Lut.
No, I'm talking about the verse that I just mentioned. So any verse in the Quran.
Yes. No, that verse, يا أخي, يعني, look, see the catastrophe, Ahmed. إنه Allah said to us, اقرأ, read the Quran. يعني sometimes حتى when we read اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. This verse, you can't just select one verse, أخي. This verse was the sequence of Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam talking to his people. So you can't say the people who are converting to Islam just read this verse. This is the kalam of Allah. The kalam of Allah in its origin, in its foundation, has light in it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Because I'm just trying to understand it. Like it's you know, you've got, for example, you've got another thing in the Quran, like who gives and who receives mehir in LGBT marriage. How would that work? Because in the Quran it says, and give the women upon marriage their bridal gifts graciously. But if they give up willingly to anything of it, then take satisfaction and ease. Nisa 4:4. So how would that work out in a gay marriage?
Wallah, I've memorized the Quran in Arabic, bro. When you read it in English like that, it sounds like Chinese to me.
You're very lucky. Like I said again, you're very blessed to be able to have this knowledge.
Allah says, we have revealed it in Arabic Quran.
Okay.
The thing is, and I don't want to get into the nisab. I mean, my answer is you live in a country that has recently legalized same-sex marriage.
What does that mean to us Muslims?
Well, we live under that, whether we agree with it or whether at least we have to respect that.
Of course we do.
Yes.
I don't disagree with
now, if you say, no, I'm going to find verses from the Quran that will give, the mahar rights and inheritance rights, it is not existent. I mean, the Quran is, you have to remember that time it was revealed in the Mecca period. Islam was in its beginning. And yes, do you think there were many references, homosexual people did exist at that time and they existed before that. However, building the Ummah's foundation, I think this was not how we focus and we put so much effort and the division and the trauma that it has caused. One must worry about us focusing so much on what Allah focused so little about. And focus so little about what Allah focused so much about.
Because there is a lot of people watching today that obviously are confused of the message that you're trying to portray. Okay, there is one more that I'm going to mention. Like, I guess the question is going to be, do you believe, will you be going to hell if you die if you're gay? Especially if you did not repent. What's the punishment in the Quran say about this? For a harvest that knows the Quran off by heart, what do you say?
And I said to you, I was a hafiz, not in the English one.
But I'm asking you from the Arabic way that you know.
Let me answer. The keys of who goes into hell and who goes into heaven is not up to anybody. It's only up to Allah Azza wa Jal. Even the Prophet ﷺ said that I wish Allah Azza wa Jal, when he said to make istighfar, He said, they asked him, don't you think that you will go into heaven? He said, maybe perhaps unless Allah Azza wa Jal covers me with His mercy. Nobody has a guarantee that they will go into heaven and hell. It is only Allah Azza wa Jal's decision. And if we actually think that we can dictate and make a person based on a particular act that for whatever reasons we are not happy with, then we are committing an act of shirk, I believe, by saying you will go to heaven. And that happens. Most of these youth who go and on cutting themselves is because of that. Because Allah Azza wa Jal did not give that to any angel nor any prophet, that privilege. Who gives the right to any alim, any mother, any father, anybody to have that authority?
No one does. But I guess to find that information again, I'm not someone that's a hafiz, not someone that's knows the Quran Arabic in that context. I understand it in an English way. And I'll keep coming across verses. It says, if two men among you are guilty of lewdness, being sexual, punish them both. If they repent and amend, leave them alone. For God is oft returning most merciful. And that's 4-16. So it does kind of, God does forgive. We understand, it says it in the Quran here, that even if there's two men that are doing a sexual act, that God will forgive them. So majority of these countries, and I understand when gay people turn around and say they're doing the wrong thing, because they're killing innocent people. They're not allowed to. You have to have witnesses. You have to, there's a procedure around it.
Can I just run? Allah says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu taqullah, O you who believe, fear Allah, wa dharu ma baqiya min al-riba in kuntum mu'minin, and detest, cease from engaging in interest if you claim faith. فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا, if you will not do this, فَأَذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, then Allah and His Rasul declares war on you. They say a person who's engaged in interest in the Day of Judgment, when they come out of their grave, Allah Azza wa Jal will say to them, Hati silahak, go get your weapon.
Okay.
Those are the only two parts. I mean, how many of us are engaged in riba? When it comes to the houses that we live in, when it comes to the houses that we're raising our children in, and yet we have such blindness from that act of kabira, a major sin, and getting involved in another person's private issues, private affairs, which Allah Azza wa Jal will eventually judge them individually, as Allah always judges us. But what gives us the power to pinpoint about the person and say Allah says this, and not blind ourselves from what we are doing in the Quran?
You've just done that though, brother. You've just mentioned ayats from the Quran. I think it was a hadith that you mentioned, not an ayat from the Quran that you've mentioned about riba.
Riba, yes. The only place, two parts, Allah Himself declares it's when it's someone engaged in interest.
Yeah, but here we are, we're discussing an ayat in the Quran about being gay.
Yes.
So it is talking about two men among you are found guilty of being sexual. Punish them both.
That is the same as the verse you read from Surah An-Nur, the second chapter. الزانية والزاني فاجلدوا كل واحد منهما مئة جلدة. Whip each person who fornicates. And these are human natural inclinations that, some people deposit it in halal, some people deposit it in haram. It does happen. And Allah Azza wa Jal made a reward and a punishment for both. But for us to come into somebody else's and other people's and to take a power that Allah Azza wa Jal has not given us, I think that is a big act of associating partners with Allah. And I worry that I think we have specialists. Somebody goes for an eye specialist, ear specialist, brain specialist. When it comes to the Quran, each one of us is a specialist, is a mufassir. And that is where our tragedy is. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said a time will come in the day of Qiyamah that, any person who's somebody or nobody will speak about the kalam of Allah and guide people so forth blindly.
He's talking also about imams.
Well, the first people, I said to you in the beginning, the first three people, one of the first will be an imam.
Yeah.
An imam,
That'll misguide. That's why it's very important to go back to the Quran sometimes and read it.
Imam is an imam.
Yeah.
Yes. So somebody who will read the Quran in Arabic, not in English. فنحن Prophet ﷺ said, "أعطي كل ذي حق حقه أحمد." Give everyone the right they deserve. I don't know about building. I can't come and tell you about building. For something I spent years on the front.
But can you tell me about this verse in the Arabic way? So can you tell me about 4-16. What I've just read to you.
That's what I said. The two men who are sleeping. What is frowned upon is promiscuity, sleeping around and doing. And that because often it happens to somebody who's masking trauma that they have gone through. Many youth, for example, have experienced, what I would refer to as pedophilic experiences as young kids. Now, to mask that later on in life, I've seen people in the hospital who will get into unhealthy sexual habits. Now, that is what's frowned upon. The same thing happens in the heterosexual world. What is encouraged is this unity, that is, and having a home and so forth. That is what's encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
So the law exists for both. I'm saying, that's what you're referring to as the two men. The same Surah An-Nur also mentions person who fornicates, and that is in reference to two straight people who are fornicating, who are not married.
Okay. A little off topic. You've asked me to request on behalf of you to be able to pray in King Street Mosque in Broadmeadows during Ramadan. Why?
Well, I missed that masjid. I remember many years ago, it was even way before I got married. I used to live in Coburg. So I know the Nicholson Street Masjid. And the King Street Masjid was a special place. I remember...
I grew up there. I was 6 years old. I love that masjid.
And I remember Dr. Habib, the shopping complex there. We used to... it was the place to go from Faulkner to go eat food there. So it was a masjid that I have good memories of. Yeah. And I haven't been in
do they know who you are? I mean, what do you need a request for? I mean, I don't think there's any sign saying that gay people are allowed. Like, have they seen you?
Well, no. I mean, I just said because when I live in South Yara and I don't have a car, so when you said I'm going to that side, I said say salam from me, inshallah. Masjid belongs to Allah. Allah says one al-masajid lillah, but it was just the memory, the good memory that I had that I said, yeah.
Look, if you want to go, I can pick you up. We can go together as long as we don't hold hands going in, or we make sure that we put socks on. We're not going to have any issues, inshallah. They're pretty accepting with people that go to their masjid. The youth there is really good as well, mashallah. Look, you're asking the government for funds to build the first gay Islamic mosque in Australia.
Never did.
You didn't?
Never did.
Okay.
That's why I said, Akhi, if you will quote, make sure you get the quote right. The media have made it come through.
So the media's made it like that, okay.
But
it seems like that. I mean, I'm looking at it, and it's like the first gay mosque in Australia, and your name's behind it.
Where is it? I had friends that called from Germany. They said, "Oh, Nur Mabruk, congratulations, the masjid." I said, "La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah." Akhi, the idea before building a masjid, it's the souls that go into the masjid that needs to be revived and healed before the masjid. The Prophet built his first masjid later on, and it was not the carpets that we have in our masajid that your leg sinks in there when you walk on. It was a masjid that was made from hasir. Dust, dirt was on the ground. But it built people like Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. So I think before we built the structures, often now I think we focus mostly on structures. But the people that occupy those structures are like walking corpses. So I think what Prophet ﷺ did with the companions was even though I was reading last night, they were talking about the manaqib of Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab. They said how brutal and how rigid he was in the early days before Islam. They used to make remarks that his donkey, perhaps Umar's donkey, would become Muslim, but there's no way that Umar will become Muslim. And look, after Allah. So that was what the Prophet ﷺ, and it was in the hearts of the people. The hearts can be worked on in any structure. I never asked for a masjid. I asked for a center where we could provide family mediation. I mean, it becomes inconvenient when you are talking with parents of a child who have been estranged from each other. The last one was 8 years. They haven't spoken to their son. Wow. And if you're sitting in a coffee shop and the mother is crying and the father is crying, it becomes inconvenient. So I mean, we have mediation services in court systems and in housing systems, and all. Why don't we have it within to cater for this area, rather than sending Muslims to what's called, I think, P-Flag, which is a Catholic parents of LGBT youth.
Okay, so they handle all that there then.
Yeah, so I said, but that caters for the Catholics. So I said there's an area that we have a vacuum in. So I thought of that, and I said, okay, it will also, because some of the youth say, let's do the 5 daily prayers. Some don't want anything to do with the prayers. So the dynamics of the group is interesting. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So I said, okay, we will also have a facility that will people pray and so forth.
So the media portrayed it wrong, because you have
the
been...
first message they said, first message gave, I never asked for that yet.
Yeah, because you have been in the media a fair bit. You had an interview with Maajid Nawaz. What did you talk to him about?
Maajid,
yeah.
I think it was some time ago now. I cannot remember. It was a radio.
Before, those who say you cannot be gay and be Muslim, how does Nur Warsame, a gay imam, reconcile the two?
Look, I think sexuality has a spectrum. I mean, we cannot put black and white, the binary code on sexuality.
If only we had an imam brave enough to make such a courageous decision here in the UK. One day it will happen, I can assure you.
Stations, I think, in London. First time, I haven't heard of him before, but it was to do with protests that were happening somewhere in London, outside Islamic schools, about the sex education or something like that.
Okay. All right. Well, there's a really good hadith from Sahih Bukhari, Book of Belief, chapter 24, that I kind of believe this is to correlate with him. The signs of a hypocrite is 3. Whenever he speaks, he tells a lie. Whenever he promises, he always breaks it. If you trust him, he proves to be dishonest. I think, brother, to be honest, Maajid is one of those people that is trying to destroy this religion, this beautiful religion.
No,
have you seen him in the media before?
No, I saw one interview with one brother from Al Jazeera he was. Yes.
Mehdi.
Yes, yeah, but they were angry. But it was, Allah alam, akhi. I mean, I thought Muslim man said Salam Alaikum, and I would be cautious of, especially now given that it's Ramadan, just be cautious, not to take somebody out of the fold of Islam. That I mean, I didn't have any previous experiences with him before that interview, nor after. But the interview I had was what I believed was a Muslim man, spoke eloquently and had some sort of interest in Islam. Was not derogatory, was not disrespectful in any way, and I wouldn't have put up with that towards me or Islam at all. I haven't had that experience for the duration of this interview.
You also got interviewed by Waleed Aly from the project. What was that like, being interviewed by another Muslim?
Wallah, alhamdulillah.
Oh, I mean, so strong that I have attempted suicide. I fell into the pressures of getting married and leading a double life. For me, as a person who had spiritual background, you can't even accept yourself because you have this encoded belief system that you have been told how.
It was, I had my intentions, they had intentions, and my intentions was to get the message in homes, to be or provide some sort of healing to one young person or one family. I didn't care about the which media outlet it was or which platform. And mind you, the cameraman was paid, the interviewer was paid. I never got paid for any of the interviews I have done.
You told me they said if this ever blows out, you'll get 50 cents or something.
No, $1.
$1. Okay, so that's what they pay people.
No, they say if it goes. How do you measure if it goes?
If it goes really well.
How do you measure that?
I guess if it's got hundreds and thousands of people that
But alhamdulillah, I mean, it was. They had their agendas. I understand. I took a while to figure it out, but eventually I did. But alhamdulillah, I also had my intentions and agendas. I wanted to. The numbers were becoming too many. Now was one person dealing with this with no nil support. So
was Waleed there to help, or
no? It was just interviewing me. Interview. Yeah. I saw him previously on the project. I knew of his father, not Waleed. I knew of his wife, but not personally. I met Waleed before that interview.
Because I believe what he did was wrong. I mean, as someone representing Islam in the media, he didn't ask any serious questions, as we're doing today. You know, all he did was promote you being a gay Muslim.
Put that to him, akhi. Why are you telling me this while I'm fasting?
Yeah,
because this is called riba. This is called backbiting.
Well, there's also, it's not really riba. It's when when a Muslim does a mistake, you
tell
need
him
to,
that. Tell him.
Yeah, you need
tell
to
him
kind
that.
of,
Tell him that.
Inshallah, he'll get this message.
10.
Look, there's also so many verses in the Quran that prove what you're doing is wrong. You know, I want to read a few of them. For ye practice your lust on men in preference to women. You are indeed a people transgressing beyond bounds. That's Araf 781. Araf 781.
Okay.
O mankind, we created you from a single pair of male and female. Hujarat 49, 133. And God did create you from dust, then from a sperm drop. Then he made you in pairs, and no female conceives or lays down her load, but with his knowledge. Fatir 35:11. You know, I don't think you can be a Muslim and an Imam, or say, you know, being gay is acceptable, because you first need to prove it through the Quran and Hadiths, and you have no proof.
And I have. You are reading Quran that's in English. I know the Quran that's in Arabic. So we are completely on two different platforms. Perhaps learn the ABC, the Alif Bata in Arabic, and then start like I have started. Because the Quran says, Inna anzalna Quran Arabiya, rather than reading it in English and telling me I'm not Muslim because of.
I'm not saying you're not Muslim, brother.
No, I thought you said you can be gay and Muslim. And
a Muslim Imam.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So what does that
I need to see some proof from you today.
Okay.
You know, so you need to prove from the Quran to us right now.
I don't need to prove anything, akhi. I don't need to prove anything.
That being gay and being an Imam is okay. Well, tell us, translate it with your Arabic.
Read Arabic. Okay. Quran was revealed in Arabic. Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyya. We have revealed it in Arabic Quran. Ye and Araf and that, I don't know that language, brother. You know, I don't know that. I haven't learned it.
But you are a Hafiz, brother, and you speak English very well.
Yes,
so,
yes.
So you're saying there's absolutely nothing in the Quran that I've just mentioned before. There's none of that in the Quran.
No, I didn't say that, ya akhi. I said if you want to have an argument.
Well, I don't want to have an argument. I'm just giving you proof.
I didn't come for that, akhi. But you said I haven't given any proof. I mean, you haven't asked me any. We have talked for 2 nights or 3 nights previously. We discussed so many things. You never mentioned one ayah. If we clarified many things. But you didn't ask me, bring one. What is your evidence, Nur? If you said that, I would have. And I can now. But and this is not the right approach, I believe. Allah alam.
Only because you're a Hafiz. I didn't think you would need it. But look, my message to those that may have feelings for the same sex and are watching, if you feel depressed and believe in Allah and his book, then seek help from trusted imams, psychologists and doctors. If you do not know anyone, email us at theaydinshow@gmail.com. We could try to help you find the right people. Thank you so much for watching, and do not forget to subscribe on our YouTube channel, The Aydin Show. Assalamu alaikum.